I still remember the smell of salt in the air the day I arrived in Breakwater Shores, a small coastal community in the United States. The gentle crash of waves, the mild ocean breeze, and the pastel-colored houses perched on slightly elevated ground all signaled a tranquil life away from big city chaos. After traveling for many years as part of my job, advising governments and international organizations on disaster preparedness, I looked forward to settling down, at least for a while. My new home was a modest, single-story house set a few blocks inland. Pale yellow siding, a fenced yard, a wooden porch swing. Simple and comforting. Best of all, the property was near enough to the beach that I could stroll there in just a few minutes, yet high enough above sea level to avoid mild floods. Since I specialized in disaster response, I'd carefully chosen a location with fewer direct vulnerabilities. But no spot on the coast was entirely risk-free, and that knowledge kept my senses attuned. The very first evening, I found a manila envelope tucked in my mailbox, a welcome packet from the Breakwater Shores Homeowners Association, HOA. Inside were forms, guidelines, and a thick set of bylaws printed on pastel paper. It looked typical at first, rules about fence heights, landscaping, garage door colors. But a second glance revealed some unusual clauses about local emergency procedures. One section read, in bold, any modifications to publicly shared property, including posted emergency signs, gates, or paths leading to major roads, require HOA pre-approval. It struck me as odd. In my line of work, I'd never seen an HOA so explicitly involved in emergency route decisions. But I brushed it off. I assumed they just wanted to keep signage uniform. Little did I know this policy would soon become a major source of conflict. It was late morning when I first met Brianna Arkwright, though everyone in the neighborhood, as I would later learn, nicknamed her Karen. Rumor was she had a knack for hounding people over minor rule infractions and always acted like she alone knew best. I was doing yard work, pulling up stubborn beach grass at the edge of my property, when I spotted a sleek silver sedan roll up. Out stepped a woman in her early 50s, wearing a prim pencil skirt, an immaculate white blouse, and large sunglasses perched atop a carefully curled hairstyle. She carried a clipboard with the HOA logo. She crossed the lawn with an air of self-importance. "Hello, you must be the new homeowner," she said, extending a hand but not really waiting for me to shake it. "I'm Brianna Arkwright, Vice President of the Breakwater Shores HOA. Most people just call me Brianna." A pause, then the hint of smirk. "But some folks have other nicknames, I suppose." I couldn't help but notice the forced politeness in her tone. I smiled. "Yes, I just moved in. I'm—" Before I could finish, she rushed on. "I saw your yard from the street and wanted to remind you that we have certain guidelines for yard decoration. Also, I hope you received our short set of rules regarding the new gating system for the roads behind the houses." I tilted my head. "Gating system behind the houses?" She clicked her tongue, nodding. "We're adding gates and fences along the back roads. It's part of our neighborhood beautification initiative. Didn't you read the letter in your packet?" I racked my memory. I saw something about gate installations, but I assumed that was just decorative. We already have a small path that leads out to the main coastal highway, right? She waved dismissively. Yes, but we're improving everything. We don't want random people wandering through our neighborhood, do we? So we'll keep some gates locked except for special circumstances. Of course, we'll provide keys to authorized residents." "Got it," I said, though something gnawed at me. In many coastal areas, roads or paths behind houses often double as emergency evacuation routes, crucial for people to escape floods, surges, or tsunamis. A locked gate seemed potentially dangerous if a sudden evacuation were necessary. Brianna plastered on a broad smile. "Wonderful. We'll keep you posted on the schedule for the gating. Don't worry, I have everything under control." Somehow, those words didn't soothe me. The subtle condescension in her tone made me suspect she was used to micromanaging every corner of the neighborhood. But I let it go, not wanting to stir the pot on my first week here. After all, how bad could a gated path be? Little did I realize that this so-called improvement was only the tip of the iceberg. Over the following days, I ventured around the neighborhood, meeting people here and there. I discovered that Breakwater Shores was truly lovely, a picturesque mix of pastel cottages and neat yards with seashell-lined driveways. The beaches were wide, the dunes tall, and the sunsets spectacular. In casual chats, though, I heard repeated grumbles about Brianna Arkwright, especially her obsession with controlling the new gating system. One neighbor, an older gentleman named Tim, confided that he was worried about how the locked gates might interfere with quick evacuation if a large storm or tsunami warning was issued. She's insisting that we keep them locked at all times except for official HOA events, he explained, leaning against his mailbox. Says it's to keep out tourists and loiterers. But in an emergency, we might need that direct route to the highway. Opening the gates could take time, or we might not have the keys. It's madness. My ears perked up at the mention of tsunami. Breakwater Shores was indeed near a known seismic zone. While major tsunamis were rare, they weren't impossible. In my line of work, ignoring that small probability was a grave error. When I asked him if he'd tried discussing it with the HOA board, he gave a weary shake of his head. Brianna's got them all wrapped around her finger. They don't dare cross her. Besides, she spouts some nonsense about how, if there's a real emergency, someone will come unlock the gates. But who? And how fast? His concerns mirrored my own. I recalled my experiences abroad. Communities that neglected proper evacuation routes often paid a tragic price when a disaster actually struck. Nonetheless, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I thanked him for the insight and resolved to attend the next HOA meeting. If the gating plan was truly reckless, maybe I could share professional advice without disclosing all the details of my background just yet. The monthly HOA meeting took place in the local community center, a converted boathouse with large windows overlooking the ocean. I arrived a few minutes early to find a small group of residents milling about, coffee cups in hand. At the front, behind a folding table, sat the board members, including Brianna. She wore a crisp blazer and tapped a pen against a thick binder of papers. When the meeting started, Brianna promptly launched into a monologue about the gating project, praising it as a vital step to preserve the character of Breakwater Shores. She even displayed some colorful diagrams depicting wrought iron gates that would close off the back roads. A few neighbors shifted uneasily, especially older folks. One raised her hand and asked, "What about emergencies? If we need a fast escape from flooding, will these gates slow us down?" Brianna's bright smile never wavered. "We'll have designated key holders, plus we'll coordinate with local authorities. Truly, there's no reason to worry. The gates are easy to open for those who have the keys." She flicked her gaze around the room, daring anyone to contradict her. I raised my hand. But are there protocols for distributing keys widely? Or a plan for unplanned emergencies, like a sudden tsunami warning at night when the key holders might be asleep or away? Evacuation routes can't hinge on a single lock, can they? Her smile tightened. "We have a thorough plan in place. The HOA board is confident it will work fine. Besides, we've been told by some local official," she waved vaguely, "that it's not a big concern." My eyebrows lifted. "Which official said that?" "Exactly." "I'd be interested in seeing any official statement from emergency management. I've done some work in disaster response, and typically, open thoroughfares are recommended during critical events." She gave a short, condescending laugh. "Well, perhaps your experience is overshadowed by our local context. Rest assured, we know what we're doing." I could sense the tension. A few neighbors shot me glances of cautious support. Brianna pressed on, rattling off how the new gates would deter unwanted visitors and raise property values. The board members nodded on cue. I realized any further objections would be met with the same dismissive attitude. So I sat quietly, inwardly troubled. When the meeting adjourned, a handful of residents approached me, thanking me for asking those questions. "She's not listening to reason," one woman whispered. "Maybe you can talk sense into her." Another man, a father of two, said he worried about potential liquefaction in case of a quake. "We can't rely on everything just working out. We need easy, direct ways to get to higher ground." I promised them I'd keep pushing the issue. But first, I needed more intel on how far along the gating plan was, and if local authorities were truly aware of it. Over the next week, I quietly did some research. I contacted the county's emergency management department, leaving them messages about the new gating proposal at Breakwater Shores. An official named Martha eventually got back to me, sounding confused on the phone. We never signed off on any gating that restricts major evacuation paths, Martha said. If that's happening, it might be a local HOA matter. But typically, any structure that impacts a designated evacuation route requires county approval. My heart sank. Are you saying they never asked for an official permit for this? The route behind the houses is marked on some older city maps as an emergency egress, if I'm not mistaken. You're correct, Martha confirmed. Breakwater Shores has 2 recognized evacuation roads. Both must remain clear unless officially rerouted. If they're erecting gates that could slow people down, that's a big no-no. We can investigate it, but we'll need more details. Perhaps you could send us the specs or meeting notes? I promised to do so, relief and worry mixing in my stomach. Relief that the county might intervene, and worry about how the HOA, specifically Brianna, would react when they found out someone had escalated the issue. Still, I had to protect the community, even if it meant stepping on a few toes. Meanwhile, the gating construction seemed to be moving at a rapid pace. Trucks delivered steel sections to the open land behind the houses. Workers dug post holes, cemented the supports, and hammered metal frames together. A tall, ornate gate began to take shape, stretching across the entire route that led to the main coastal highway. Some neighbors stood by, shaking their heads. Others seemed resigned to Brianna's unstoppable will. I walked up to one of the construction crew members, politely introducing myself. Do you have a permit for this installation? Are you aware it might be an official evacuation route? He shrugged, pointing me to the head contractor, who simply said they were contracted by the HOA. We're just doing the job we were hired for, he replied, looking uneasy. Ask the HOA for details. The sense of mounting urgency spurred me to dig deeper. I compiled board meeting minutes, photos, and Brianna's own handouts about the gating plan. Then I forwarded them to Martha at the county office, who said they'd initiate a formal review. Little did I know how quickly events would escalate. While the gating fiasco intensified, nature decided to raise the stakes further. A week after I sent documents to the county, news outlets started reporting seismic activity off the coast. Small tremors, a sign that the tectonic plates in the region were restless. Meteorologists and geologists cautioned that while it didn't guarantee a tsunami, it increased the possibility of a significant quake in the near future. People in coastal areas were advised to be vigilant, check their emergency kits, and review evacuation plans. In Breakwater Shores, a ripple of concern spread through the neighborhood. Families discussed quake-proofing their homes and ensuring they had enough supplies. Yet, ironically, the gating project pressed on full steam. I saw no sign of the HOA slowing or adjusting their approach. If anything, Brianna seemed more resolute, as though stamping her mark on the community before any outside authority could intervene. I confronted her one morning near the construction site. The region's seeing increased seismic activity. Shouldn't we at least wait and confirm the safety and legality of these gates? The county is investigating, you know. She gave me a frosty glare. I'm well aware of your meddling, trying to sabotage a perfectly legitimate enhancement. The gating is almost complete, and we have every right to keep our property secure from trespassers. We're not halting the project because of some hypothetical scenario. Her dismissive tone made my blood boil. It's not hypothetical. We're on a coast. Tsunamis can happen, especially after strong quakes. And that back road is a critical evacuation route recognized by the county. She flipped her hair back, raising her chin. You're an expert, are you? Well, the HOA board has decided. If you keep stirring up trouble, you'll face consequences, fines, or worse. I stared at her, incredulous. You'd rather fine me than address a legitimate life or death concern? She gave a short, humorless laugh. You assume you're the only one who knows about emergencies. We're not incompetent. The gates can be opened if needed. With that, she pivoted sharply and strode away, leaving me fuming. Just as I hoped, the county stepped in, at least partially. Martha and another official from the Emergency Management Department visited Breakwater Shores to inspect the new gates. They brought along a folder of official maps designating the roads behind the neighborhood as an evacuation path. Some neighbors, upon seeing county vehicles, hovered nearby, anxious for answers. Brianna arrived on scene, flanked by two other HOA board members. She wore a taut smile as she greeted the county officials, ignoring me entirely. Martha explained the concerns. We need to ensure these gates won't hinder emergency egress. Typically, an evacuation route can't have locked barricades. Are these gates going to remain unlocked or electronically controlled? One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Brianna responded breezily. We have a system of key holders plus a manual override. It's all in the planning documents. Martha frowned. Yes, but that's not standard procedure. In a disaster, you can't assume the key holder is available or that people can operate a manual override under duress. We usually require a free-flowing path or at most a coded gate with a widely known code. Are you open to changes? Brianna's jaw tightened. The HOA has already spent considerable resources. We can't just tear everything down because of a theoretical event. She put emphasis on theoretical, making the tension sizzle in the air. Martha sighed, glancing at her colleague. We'll have to file a formal compliance notice. You may be required to modify or remove these gates if they are deemed a violation of county regulations. A flicker of anger passed over Brianna's face. That's ridiculous. Our attorney will be in touch. Then she turned on her heel and stormed back to her car, the other board members trailing behind. The county officials exchanged exasperated looks, then walked over to me. Martha spoke in a hushed tone. She's quite the character, but we're not giving up. It may take time for the legal steps to unfold, though. Meanwhile, if a real emergency strikes, I worry this might hamper evacuation. I nodded grimly. So do I. Let's hope we don't face a tsunami anytime soon. But we can't rely on hope alone. No good deed goes unpunished, or so they say. The more I pushed for an open evacuation route, the more Brianna, Karen, saw me as a personal threat to her authority. I soon became the target of what felt like petty harassment. A letter claimed my fence was 2 inches higher than HOA guidelines. Another letter alleged that the color of my mailbox was not on the approved palette. A violation notice scolded me for leaving my trash bin out an hour longer than permitted. Each letter threatened fines or further action if I didn't comply. Neighbors whispered that Brianna was targeting me, but I didn't budge. I fixed minor issues that were truly my responsibility, but contested the obviously frivolous claims. Meanwhile, I quietly prepared a thorough write-up on the dangers of restricting evacuation routes in seismically active regions, citing case studies from my professional experience in Japan, Chile, and elsewhere. My plan was to share this document at the next HOA meeting and with the county's legal counsel. Perhaps raw data could break through the HOA's stubborn stance. As I compiled this information, I began noticing how many residents truly feared Karen. They were reluctant to speak up or take a stand. One father confided that he dreaded losing access to community amenities. Another neighbor, a recent widow, worried that if she angered the HOA, they might make her life miserable. I realized then the scope of Brianna's hold on Breakwater Shores, a mix of intimidation, fines, and an image of authority. Determined to change that dynamic, I told people about my professional background, though not in detail. I said I'd spent years working internationally on disaster readiness, that I'd witnessed firsthand how crucial it was to maintain open evacuation paths. My hope was that knowledge would encourage others to back me up. Some did, timidly, while others still hung back, unsure if it was worth incurring Brianna's wrath. One evening, as I was finalizing my briefing materials, I felt a tremor, a mild quake that rattled windows and toppled a vase off my kitchen table. Immediately, my adrenaline spiked. I rushed outside, scanning the horizon. Neighbors poured on the lawns, wide-eyed. The quake subsided after a few seconds, leaving behind an eerie hush. My phone chimed with an alert. A magnitude 5.2 quake offshore. Not huge, but a stark reminder of the region's instability. Local news anchors jumped on the story. They mentioned the slight risk of a tsunami, though nothing major was expected from a quake of that scale. Still, it was a taste of how swiftly things could escalate if the quake had been larger. I took the opportunity to bring up the gating issue once more, stepping into the street where people had gathered. "We got lucky this time," I said, addressing whoever would listen. "But if we had a bigger quake, a tsunami threat is real. And those gates out back could slow us down when every second counts." Some nodded in agreement. Others mumbled uncertainly. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted Brianna striding toward us, expression tight. She raised her voice, painting a veneer of reassurance. "Everyone, please remain calm. The quake was minor. The tsunami risk is minimal. The HOA stands prepared if anything happens." I couldn't help but challenge her. "Prepared how, exactly? Will you unlock the gates right away? Do we have a system to ensure they'll be open for the entire neighborhood?" She shot me a thin-lipped smile. "I've named a few key holders. If an alert is issued, we'll handle it. So there's no need for fear-mongering." I pressed. "What if the key holders are out of town or unreachable? What if the quake damages the gate locks?" Disaster scenarios rarely unfold so neatly. Her features hardened, cheeks flushing. "You presume a lot. I've consulted with local authorities. Actually, I cut in. The county says they've never approved these gates, and they're still investigating possible code violations." A flicker of rage flashed in her eyes. "You're stepping out of line. This is a private community matter, and we do not need your so-called expertise." She practically spat the last word. With that, she turned on her heel and stomped back toward her house, leaving me and a handful of neighbors standing there, tension thick in the salty air. I knew the confrontation was building to a climax. Now, with the ground literally shaking beneath our feet, the stakes had never been higher. Just a few days after that quake, I was in the middle of drafting an email to the county about the HOA's ongoing defiance when an urgent alert popped up on my phone. Tsunami warning. Magnitude 7.9 earthquake off the coast. Potentially life-threatening wave activity. Evacuate low-lying areas immediately. My heart hammered. 7.9 was massive. If the quake was close enough to generate a significant wave, Breakwater shores could be in the crosshairs. I bolted out of the house, adrenaline surging. Neighbors spilled onto the streets in various states of panic, some with backpacks, others grabbing children and pets. Cars fired up, horns honking. People shouted directions. But the official guidelines were clear: get to higher ground as quickly as possible. For many, that meant heading out the back road to the main highway, which led uphill away from the coastline. When I reached the first intersection behind the homes, I found a horrifying sight. The newly erected gates locked shut. A chain and padlock barred the route. People milled around, frantic, some yelling. "Where are the keys? We need to get out now." I took charge, shouting so folks could hear. "Stay calm. Let's see if we can open this or find someone who has the key." A wave could arrive in minutes or an hour. No one knew exactly. But we had to move fast. A neighbor pointed toward Brianna's house. "She's one of the key holders." Another said, "But she's not answering her phone." I set my jaw, dread and anger swirling. If the gate didn't open soon, a surge of evacuees would clog the single other road out of town. Some folks might get caught in traffic or simply not make it in time. This was the exact scenario I'd feared. We hammered on the gate to test its strength. It was robust metal, no easy way around it except scaling the fence or cutting the chain. A few agile teens climbed over, but older folks and families with small kids couldn't manage that easily. The crowd grew, panic mounting. In the distance, sirens wailed as emergency vehicles patrolled the coastline. I whipped out my phone, trying to call or text Brianna. No response. Then, a neighbor spotted her car, creeping down a side lane. We waved, shouting for her to stop. She did, reluctantly, and rolled down her window. "What is this chaos?" she sputtered. "Why aren't you all using the main road?" "Main road is jammed," I snapped. "We need this route open. Hand over the key or unlock it yourself, for God's sake." She stammered, eyes flicking from the crowd to her phone. I forgot my key inside. And maybe I should just drive around to the other exit. I'll meet you all there. Exasperation flared in me. We don't have time for this. Give me your house key. I'll run back and grab the gate key if you left it there. Brianna's face reddened. That's private property. I won't let a meddler rummage in my home. You're not even part of the official HOA security team. My patience snapped. People's lives are at stake. I roared. This is exactly the scenario you refuse to prepare for. Either unlock the gate or get out of the way. She just sat there, flustered. Others begged or cursed at her. Finally, someone shouted, "We'll break it open. Anyone have bolt cutters?" Another man rummaged in his truck bed, pulling out a heavy tool. We crowded around, ignoring Brianna's sputtered protests. A group of us forcibly cut the chain. The padlock snapped, the gate swung open, and a flood of residents and cars poured through. I exhaled, shoulders trembling with relief. The wave might strike soon, but at least people had a clear path to safety now. Brianna huffed. This is vandalism. I'll have you all charged with property destruction. But nobody was listening. We scattered to higher ground, forging onward in the face of possible catastrophe. As it turned out, the tsunami that formed off the coast was smaller than feared, but still large enough to swamp portions of the shoreline. The surge of water destroyed some beach structures, flooded roads near the sea, and battered the breakwaters. However, most residents of Breakwater shores escaped to safety on higher ground. The one major difference? Thanks to that forcibly open gate, we avoided a traffic logjam that could have proven deadly had the wave been bigger or arrived sooner. In the immediate aftermath, the local police, fire department, and county emergency management officials converged on the area to assess damage and help with recovery. News crews captured footage of the twisted remains of the gate's chain, the watery chaos near the coast, and relieved residents hugging one another. No one died, thank heaven, but the near miss was enough to bring the gating controversy roaring into the spotlight. Within a day, the story made local headlines. Locked evacuation route nearly traps coastal residents. HOA under fire. The article detailed how a group of homeowners had to cut the chain in order to evacuate. Brianna's name appeared prominently, identified as the HOA vice president, who championed the project despite warnings from local and external experts. Furious neighbors spoke openly to reporters about her arrogance and the numerous ignored safety concerns. In the subsequent days, county officials launched a full-blown investigation. The evidence of code violations, especially the unauthorized gating of a recognized emergency route, was overwhelming. On top of that, multiple residents filed complaints against Brianna personally, accusing her of endangering lives. Some even mentioned the repeated fines and intimidation tactics she'd wielded. I was called to speak with the county's legal team. Given my background in disaster response, I provided a thorough explanation of the risks of restricting evacuation routes, referencing precedents from around the world. I also shared the documented attempts we'd made to warn the HOA. The attorneys looked grim, acknowledging that this fiasco could have ended far worse if the tsunami had struck more powerfully. Meanwhile, an embarrassed group of HOA board members quickly distanced themselves from Brianna, claiming she'd spearheaded the gating project, withheld crucial information, and misled them about county approvals. Some even resigned, clearly anxious to dodge accountability. But it was too late. The scandal was too big to contain. Legal repercussions came swiftly. The county's district attorney announced potential charges of reckless endangerment and unauthorized obstruction of emergency pathways against those responsible for the gating. After weeks of evidence gathering, Brianna Arkwright was formally indicted. Police arrested her at her home, leading her away in handcuffs as news cameras rolled. A surreal sight in the normally quiet Breakwater shores. During her arraignment, more unsavory details emerged. Investigators found that Brianna had bypassed official permitting processes, ignoring multiple letters from the county that questioned the project's legality. She'd even used HOA funds improperly, paying for consultant fees to a relative's company that did no legitimate work. That opened the door to fraud and embezzlement charges. Neighbors watched in equal parts relief and shock as the once powerful HOA figure faced the very real prospect of prison time. Her attorney tried to portray her as a misunderstood community volunteer, but the evidence was damning. Testimonies from frantic residents, the damage from the tsunami, and the official county maps she disregarded left the court with a stark picture of negligence and abuse of power. In the final blow, a civil lawsuit from numerous Breakwater Shores families demanded restitution for emotional distress, property damage associated with the delayed evacuation route, and the misappropriation of HOA dues. Brianna's property, her stately two-story house near the water, went under a lien to cover potential judgments. Eventually, she was convicted of reckless endangerment and misuse of HOA funds, among other charges. At sentencing, the judge did not mince words. He lambasted Brianna for endangering lives with her astonishing hubris and disregard for public safety. The court handed down a multi-year prison sentence and ordered confiscation of her property to help pay fines and settlement costs. Cameras snapped photos of a tearful, stunned Brianna as she was taken into custody. With Brianna removed and the HOA in disarray, a new leadership emerged. Neighbors who valued transparency and recognized the importance of expert input on safety matters. They promptly removed the gates from the evacuation road, restoring an unobstructed path to the main highway. County guidelines were adopted, ensuring that all future community projects would comply with emergency regulations. Local news outlets continued to interview me about the incident. After some reluctance, I finally disclosed more of my professional background, how I'd spent years in various parts of the world, helping governments refine their disaster preparedness strategies. In light of that, some residents jokingly called me their guardian angel. I found the nickname embarrassing, but appreciated the sentiment. In reality, it was the entire community, especially those courageous enough to speak up, who had forced change. In the months that followed, Breakwater Shores rebounded. The coastline bore some scars from the tsunami, but homes were rebuilt, dunes were reinforced, and a new sense of unity flourished. Freed from Brianna's reign of intimidation, neighbors collaborated on improving the community, such as forming a volunteer emergency network and scheduling regular drills. Every so often, I'd spot the battered remains of the old gate posts lying in a junk pile, a silent reminder of how one person's vanity project nearly cost lives. The ocean waves still rolled in, vast and powerful, but we faced them with renewed vigilance. We might not stop nature's fury, yet we could at least prepare responsibly. As for Brianna, Karen, she languished in prison, her property seized, her once proud position shattered. It was a cautionary tale about the consequences of letting arrogance override public safety. In a final ironic twist, some documents revealed that Brianna once tried to market Breakwater Shores as a place with excellent tsunami preparedness, apparently for bragging rights. The ultimate hypocrisy. Now, on a typical morning, I walk along the sandy shore, the sun rising beyond the horizon. I breathe in the fresh, salt air, grateful to live in a place that overcame a dangerous mistake. No more locked gates. No more tyranny from a delusional HOA Karen. Just a resilient, watchful community, and me quietly continuing my work as a disaster response expert, ready to step in whenever needed, certain that we are all safer now than before.